Good to see you all. Lovely day. It's actually quite rainy outside. I was just outside before we started. But welcome. Always good to talk with members of my community. And Happy New Year. This is our first YouTube live stream of 2021. So glad to be with you all tonight. Glad you're here. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. And if you've got super chat questions, I will have answers for you. We know the format that we always use here, which is I give my opening remarks, which will be pretty brief tonight. I give my opening remarks, then we do our roll call, where I call you out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, I answer your super chat questions, and then the show ends. So that's how we do it here. I wasn't anticipating giving a big speech tonight, so they won't be too long opening remarks. So really, it'll be your super chats that make the show, make or break the show, so to speak. So the more that you super chat, the longer we go, the more I answer your questions. It's always fun to engage with you all. But quick update, for those of you who may not be aware, Jason Unruhe and myself, that's Maoist Rebel News, just about an hour ago, we had a discussion about this whole billionaires thing, which I'm almost kind of sick of talking about. I'm just tired of talking about it. We talked for about an hour and 14 minutes about the whole concept of billionaires and the higher stage of communism and how it can be achieved. And we went back and forth. And honestly, I'm glad that I provoked a discussion about this concept in leftist circles. Now, also earlier today, I had a great conversation on the Actually at Capacity podcast with Mila. Mila is an anti-imperialist. She's of Middle Eastern descent herself. She studies political science and international relations at the university. She's an academic, greatly inspired by Lenin and greatly inspired by St. Augustine. And we had a great conversation. We talked for a good hour or so today, and it's on my Twitter. You can see the link, and hopefully I'll be posting on this channel eventually. We had a great conversation on the At Capacity podcast. So if you want to check out Actually at Capacity is the name of the podcast, Actually at Capacity, and I had a conversation with Mila at Actually at Capacity. That was a good conversation that we had. But folks, there is something more serious hanging over us. Look, this conversation about socialist billionaires and what it means to achieve the higher stage of communism is a very important theoretical conversation. But there is a very, very pressing issue hanging over us in our time. A very pressing issue right now, and that is the threat of a war with Iran. The Islamic Republic of Iran brought a letter to the UN Security Council warning about the pending danger of U.S. military adventurism. They warned that the United States may be planning some kind of false flag operation to justify a war with Iran, and that the Trump administration may try to escalate and start a war with Iran before they leave office. They may be trying to take dramatic international moves right before they leave office. And this was, Javad Zarif, who is the Iranian foreign minister, has been raising the alarm at the top of his voice around the world about the United States under the Trump administration, going after Iran and escalating with Iran. The Trump administration has done everything they can to exacerbate tensions between the United States and Iran. All right. Left comms, USSR, China. Wrote it down. Thank you for the super chat. And this is a serious concern. The danger of a new war against the Islamic Republic of Iran is very, very disturbing. I'm someone who has spent a lot of time in Iran and, life-changing experiences for me. I went to Iran. The first time I visited Iran was because I had been working with Press TV, the TV news outlet of Iran. I've been working with them, and I was invited to attend the New Horizon Conference, which was an anti-imperialist conference that took place in Iran, and that was the first time I ever went there. And I had never been to the Middle East before, and I'll tell you, it was amazing. All right, Lukashenko. It was amazing. And I learned a lot in that country. And I learned a lot about how they do things and a lot about their culture. I went back to Iran the next year in 2015 to participate in a humanitarian mission. I actually went with a group of Iranian doctors and surgeons and medical professionals and on a ship to try and reach Yemen and deliver aid to the people of Yemen. And that was an amazing experience. 13 days on a ship, with doctors and medical volunteers from the Islamic Red Crescent Society or the Iranian Red Crescent Society. And after that, I went back to Iran, and we actually made a film in Iran. I spent another month in Iran making a documentary film, which is still shown on Iranian television. It's called Iranian Dream. So that was an amazing experience, and I've been all over the country. Went back to Iran later that year in 2015 for the next New Horizon Conference, which was a conference dedicated to the Black liberation struggle. And I got to meet leaders of the Nation of Islam, leaders of Black and African liberation movements around the world. That was amazing. Hankies argue. Okay, writing it down, and Tanky one and Tankies argue with everyone, and Tigray conflict. Tailman, KDP, post-German Revolution. KDP, German Revolution. All right. Iran is an amazing country. And I mean, I learned a lot about how the economy works. I met with, people from all different walks of life. I went to northern Tehran and met with the Iranian wealthy folks who don't like the government and want to be America and eat hamburgers and have, they all drive BMWs and they're very wealthy and they're capitalists and they want the United States and Iran to get along and they don't like the Islamic Revolution. I went to hardliner neighborhoods where there are people that are strong supporters of the Islamic Revolution, very, very anti-imperialist. I actually am one of the few Americans who's been in the same room as the supreme leader of Iran. I actually saw the supreme leader, Khamenei, speak to an audience of 20,000 people at the Shrine of Khomeini, and that was a life-changing experience, which I've described elsewhere. And when it gets down to it, the Islamic Revolution of Iran and the Islamic Republic that emerged out of it was an upsurge of anti-imperialism and anti-capitalism. The people of the Middle East, inspired by what happened in Iran, there were uprisings all across the region around the slogan of not capitalism, but Islam, war of poverty against wealth. It was just an explosion of anger at imperialism and injustice. They referred to American imperialism as the Great Satan, and they were determined to build a new society where people came first and human needs and religious principles came before the profits of big bankers and corporations. Okay. Okay, good question, Chris. Captain Picard. All right. And, the Islamic Republic of Iran is a center of resistance to Western imperialism and capitalism. Iran took control of its oil resources. Oil was technically nationalized under the Shah, but not really. But as a result of the revolution, Iranian oil is now in the hands of a revolutionary state that has used the oil of Iran to develop the economy and build up the economy. All right. Growth under socialism. And Iran has broken free. And they've given aid to the people of Lebanon to fight for their rights. They've given aid to the people in Bahrain, the Shia majority of Bahrain that lives under a brutal dictatorship backed up by the United States, imposed on them by the Saudis and by the United States, the people of Bahrain who are fighting for their rights against a monarchy that oppresses them. Iran has aided the Palestinians in their struggle for liberation. And Iran aided the people of Ireland and the Irish Republican Army. There's actually a street in Iran named after Bobby Sands, the great martyr of the Irish Republican Army, the Irish, freedom struggle, right? Bobby Sands, of H Block. And pictures of Malcolm X are on display everywhere in Iran. There are murals on display in public places condemning Israel and condemning American imperialism everywhere. When I was there, I remember in downtown Tehran, they had a mural. I'll never forget this. They had a mural, and it was the Iwo Jima, right, the American flag being hoisted up, but below it, instead of ground, they had the American flag being hoisted up over a pile of corpses to make the point that American imperialism is built on mass murder. Everywhere you go in Iran, the people are very opposed to Western capitalism. They very much favor a society where people have access to jobs and healthcare and education. The idea that people wouldn't get guaranteed healthcare or wouldn't get guaranteed education is foreign to them. I remember when I was talking with Iranian doctors on the ship, I was telling them in the United States, there are people in the United States who lose their homes and have to mortgage their homes and lose their homes because of healthcare costs. And they said to me, well, that's probably because they wanted to go to like a really expensive private hospital. And I said, no, this is just to get basic medical care. Americans lose their homes. They were shocked. I told them that there were Americans, that are in debt for many years simply for going to college. And they said, okay, but that's because they wanted to go to a very, very expensive private college. And I said, no, just to get a basic college education in American people goes into debt. Angry Republicans. Okay. All right. In Iran, they have these things called the Basij councils that are in every neighborhood, enforcing the goals and principles of the Islamic Revolution in the local area. And on top of that, in Iran, the biggest economic entity is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is an organization that is not even accountable to the elected government, only accountable to the supreme leader. It's a military, paramilitary group that enforces the revolution. Okay. Why? So Iran is a very revolutionary society. And it's because of that that the U.S. imperialists want to crush it. Wall Street and the London Stock Exchange don't like the fact that Iran has broken out of their system and started to raise its people up out of poverty. It has independent economic development. It has an economy that's organized to serve the people of Iran. And because of that, it's been under attack. Right? The USA has done everything it can to try and tear apart Iran. It has funded separatist groups, right? Whether it be Arab separatist groups or Kurdish separatist groups. It has Sunni separatist groups that the USA is tied to. It's been proven that the U.S. government is tied to separatist groups that have tried to break Sunni folks on the Afghan border. And it is very much a country that has undergone a huge amount of attack. Look, when I was in Iran, I'll never forget that there was a guy, a revolutionary question, okay? There was a guy who wanted to be an airline pilot. And he couldn't be an airline pilot because in order to get airline parts, Iran couldn't get them because of sanctions. And Iran only has a certain number of airline pilots because they can't make more airplanes in Iran because they need certain parts that because of U.S. sanctions they can't get. There are Iranians who have died because they can't get access to medical drugs that are unavailable because of U.S. sanctions imposed on the country. There are all kinds of very, very, very evil things the U.S. government has done to Iran. And, you know, the Iran nuclear deal happened. Iran was never trying to get a nuclear bomb. At every moment, they were complying with the International Atomic Energy Agency. At no point did they ever violate the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Every nuclear site in Iran is monitored 24/7, video surveillance. But, work. Did not. That hasn't stopped the international media from declaring that Iran has nuclear ambitions, which it clearly does not. Regardless, at the table, the negotiating table in Geneva, Iran signed away most of its peaceful nuclear energy program. And it made huge concessions, but that didn't stop, right? Trump ripped up the Iran nuclear deal. Trump then killed, it's coming up on the anniversary of when Trump killed Qasem Soleimani. And, you know, one of the most important military leaders in Iran's history, really. And because of that, you know, because the U.S. imperialists will not give Iran peace, things have escalated. Private guns. It's a big problem, right? And now we have the killing of this nuclear scientist. And now there is a real danger of war, and U.S. military ships are moving into the region. This is a very dangerous situation because Iran is aligned with China, aligned with Russia, and this could all escalate into something really, really dangerous. If the United States goes to war with Iran, this could mean World War III. That's basically what it would mean. And if that happens, we're in a deep, deep load of trouble. And, you know, I mean, the other thing is that if the USA attacks Iran, it will be very, very isolated because never since 1979 has there been so much sympathy for Iran around the world. In Europe, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, all those countries said to the United States, don't rip up the nuclear deal. They are sympathetic to Iran, right? So much of the world is saying Iran made huge concessions, did the right thing, negotiated, shut down its nuclear energy program, and now the USA rips up the nuclear deal, and now the USA kills Qasem Soleimani. If the USA wants to escalate a war with Iran, it's going to be very hard for them to get France to back them up, or Germany to back them up, or even Britain to back them up. You know, I mean, U.S. imperialism is going to be very, very isolated. Israel will be with them, and Israel definitely wants a war with Iran. Israel's been trying to polarize the region against Iran. Negative effects. Dang. Reforms. Israel would certainly, you know, want to escalate that tension. And Israel, you know, it's never been more friendly to Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates or Bahrain as a result of Trump trying to polarize the region and build an Arab NATO against Iran. And the USA is selling weapons like crazy throughout that region. So weapons contractors are very happy about the rising tension, and they're making a bonanza of money. But at the end of the day, who would benefit from a U.S. attack on Iran? Who would benefit? I mean, this is a very dangerous situation. I'm glad Iran is warning about the danger of false flags, because people hear the word false flag and they roll their eyes. Blah, that never happens. What is this, Alex Jones false flag? Google the Gulf of Tonkin. Google it. That was a false flag. The Gulf of Tonkin was a false flag staged by the United States. Right? Folks remember the Naria testimony that paved the way for the Gulf War? Right? The Gulf War, the USA went to war with Iraq with Saddam Hussein, with the Ba'athist Arab Socialist government of Iraq. They went to war with them, and the way they did it was they gave Iraq permission to invade Kuwait. They actually, U.S. officials said to Iraq and said to the world that it was okay for Iraq to invade Kuwait. So Iraq invaded Kuwait. And then, after that happened, U.S. officials immediately started playing up all over the media. Oh my God, Iraq invaded Kuwait. They just told them they could. Anyway, so Iraq is invading Kuwait, and then they found this woman named Naria, right? And she testified before Congress, but not before a real congressional committee. And she didn't testify under oath. And she cried on TV. And they showed a clip of her on TV over and over and over again. The babies, the babies. The Iraqi soldiers are taking the babies. And just crying and crying and crying. And they showed it 24/7. I mean, it was just on CNN over and over and over again. And the American people were crying, oh my God, those poor Iraqis. And George Herbert Walker Bush got on TV and said, this is just like Hitler. It's just like Hitler. We don't want to have to intervene, but we have to. It's a humanitarian intervention. And the USA went to war. And later on, we found out that that Naria testimony was a hoax. It was a false flag testimony. That woman had never been in the hospital. She was a member of the Kuwaiti royal family who'd been coached. She didn't even testify under oath. The whole thing had been staged by a public relations firm. It wasn't even real congressional testimony, right? So if you have it in your head, which Vosh and all of them, oh, there's never lies to take us to war. Oh, you're the same as a Nazi if you think the U.S. government lies to take us into war. Oh, everything the U.S. government ever says about China is true, and if you don't think that, you're a Nazi. If you're like that, I'm sorry, you need to wake up. False flag attacks do happen and have laid the basis for horrendous crimes by the U.S. imperialists. Cyber pandemic. Okay. Okay. So, all right. So we got, all right, cyber. And we got. Okay. So this is all a very, very dangerous situation right now. Right? And a false flag attack, right? If the media is able to march in lockstep, if they're able to get the whole U.S. media to say, oh my God, Iran committed a horrendous terrorist attack, poor innocent Americans died, and they're able to convince people, and then they go and start World War III, that would be a very bad situation. It's not what Europe wants. It's not what the Biden administration wants, but it seems to be what a particular faction in the Trump administration wants. It's what Mike Pompeo wants. He would love a war with Iran, right? Mike Pompeo has been trying to start World War III since the moment he became Secretary of State. He is a deranged neoconservative lunatic, right? On top of that, you got Gina Haspel, who replaced Mike Pompeo as CIA director. Gina Haspel, a.k.a. the torture lady, right? She would like that. Right? You know who else would like a new war with Iran? You know who else would like a new war with Iran? Betsy DeVos, right? She's Trump's Secretary of Education. She's gutting our public school system and pushing charter schools, but it just so happens that her brother is Eric Prince of Blackwater, the military contracting company that makes lots of money from private military contractors. So yeah, she would like to see a new war. And you know who else would like to see a new war? Bernie Marcus, the owner of Home Depot. Home Depot, right? Go to Home Depot. Try to find anything on the shelf that is not paid for by a military contracting corporation, right? Home Depot, that store. Well, Bernie Marcus, he is very much a fanatical conservative Trump supporter. He pays for PragerU and their right-wing YouTube nonsense. He pays for Charlie Kirk and Turning Points USA. And Bernie Marcus, he would make a bonanza of profits off war with Iran. You know who else would like to see a war with Iran? Sheldon Adelson. Sheldon Adelson, the real estate giant of Nevada, right, who is closely tied in with Netanyahu and the Likud party. Yeah, he would love to see a war with Iran. Now, a war with Iran would be bad for the whole human race, pretty much. It would be pretty much the opening shot of World War III. But there are certain entities that are benefiting from war and destruction and death. And those entities want to be stopped. And Trump made a deal. Trump said he was a non-interventionist. Trump said he didn't want to start wars. But you know what? Trump was ready to go to war with Venezuela. The only reason there wasn't a war with Venezuela, the only reason there was not a war with Venezuela, was because there were Chinese military contractors in Venezuela. I'll be real. There were Chinese military contractors in Venezuela, and it was made clear to Donald Trump that going to war with Venezuela was going to war with China. They already had the false flag. Do you remember this? It was revealed. They had an aid truck to bring food to Venezuela, and they set it on fire. The opposition set their own food truck on fire, and said, Maduro burned the food truck. And then Max Blumenthal and others revealed the video that no, they lit their own food truck on fire. It was a lie. But they were ready to invade Venezuela for burning the food truck, and they didn't. But probably the reason that they didn't was because of the presence of Chinese military advisors. China was ready to send its soldiers to defend Venezuela, so the U.S. imperialists backed down. So now we've got Iran. Got the Islamic Republic of Iran. And in Iran, right, the USA took action, murdered Qasem Soleimani in neighboring Iraq. With Biden, in like war with Iran, right? And murdering the nuclear scientist, and now the latest, this escalation. This is all a very, 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 very dangerous situation. And all of us who love peace should be watching and waiting. If some kind of false flag happens, we should be the first to come out and say, is this the false flag Iran was warning us about? We should be the first to say, whoa, wait a second, right? Because propaganda and deception is very important when you're setting the stage for a war. And we have got to be the people who go, whoa, wait a second. We don't buy your lies, government. We don't buy your lies, government. We're not ready to get swept into World War III just yet. Yes, I know CNN is making me cry. Yes, I know you're manipulating our emotions. We're not ready for it. We need to make sure we're not in a situation to be manipulated. Regarding Stalin's parties to get leaders drunk. Okay. All right. Okay. Another news story, though, in addition to the looming danger of war with Iran. I did want to mention that now we do have this relief package, right? Trump's veto has been overridden. $600. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So many Americans suffering. So many people without jobs. Restaurants closed. The economy shut down. Mass unemployment. You think $600 is going to cut it? $600 is going to cut it. Unbelievable. Unbelievable, right? This is what the government is willing to offer us. They're willing to spend billions on war, billions on the Dalai Lama, billions on all kinds of stuff. But they got $600 for the American people in a time like this. This is the bailout the American people get from their government. $600, right? That is basically just an announcement from the government that they don't care about average Americans. The economy is shut down, the pandemic, $600. Okay. Redistribution. All right. $600. Unbelievable what the U.S. leaders are doing. Meanwhile, somebody seems to have vandalized the home of Nancy Pelosi. I don't know if folks saw that. There's video going around, not video, photos going around of, some blood and some spray painting on the home of Nancy Pelosi, right? Apparently somebody wasn't too pleased with this deal that Nancy Pelosi gave into. You can look at the footage. Apparently the police tried to stop the footage of it, the photographs from going out, but somebody vandalized the home of Nancy Pelosi saying we need $2,000. Yeah, it was pretty intense. So there you go. That happened. And look, there is a boiling rage on the lower levels of the Democratic Party. The average Democratic voter right now is furious. Look, people support Jimmy Dore. People support force the vote, right? And what's shocking is how many of these fake internet socialists are trying to hold back the anger of the rank and file Democrats. The people, so many people in this country are ready to rise up. They want health care. They want jobs. They're angry at the government. They're being sold out. And, Jimmy Dore is saying what they think, and I'm saying what they think, and Crystal Ball is saying what they think. But so much of the socialist apparatus, like Jacobin and Vosh, and just the whole left-wing internet, right? Chapo, Trap House, all that, trying to hold back, trying to say, stop it, guys, stop it. Don't get mad. But it's happening. The lower levels of the Democratic Party, America and imperialism. The lower levels of the Democratic Party are furious about this. They're just in a rage about what's been happening in the country. They're ready to rise up. They're ready to hear what we're all about on these lives. So this is going to be an interesting year. This is how 2021 begins, with the danger of a new war against Iran, with a stimulus relief bill that is insulting. It's insulting to average Americans. And that's where we're at. That's where we're at. But I'm optimistic. I remain optimistic. I think my optimism kind of triggered Jason a little bit, but that's okay. But, I remain optimistic. Optimism is your strength. Optimism is your power. If you can wake up every morning prepared to fight against injustice, if you can wake up tomorrow understanding that we will get to socialism and eventually a world of stateless, classless society, if you are that kind of person, you'll keep going through all of this, right? This is the reason to keep going in these dark times. So no more doomerism, no more destruction, no more pessimism. We keep our heads high. We stand against fascism and war, and we fight for peace, jobs, democracy, and equality. We need a government of action that will fight for working families, a real government of action that will fight for working families. That's what we do here. That's what we're all about on these lives, and we ain't stopping anytime soon. So there you go, folks. On that note, I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? I'll call you out as I see you. Chicago, Sammy. Henderson, Nevada. Long Island, New York. Cleveland Pirate Alex. Portugal. Las Vegas. Fayetteville, Texas. Legend of Shanghai. Belize. Morlock. San Francisco. Cincinnati, Ohio. Jenny Lynn. JT24 in Mississippi. Daniel in Los Angeles. NYC. Bendigo, Australia. David Fox. Good friend of the show. Denver. Las Vegas. Clarksville, Tennessee. Sharon, Massachusetts. Norway. Ginnaville, Milwaukee, Springfield, Missouri, Cambridge, UK, Happy New Year from Mexico, Glendale, California, Santiago, Chile, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Ryan in Oakland, California, good friend of the show, shout out to you, Ryan, Class Analysis, Ukraine, Montana, Shaw from Maryland, Northern California, Albany, New York, Jack Dundee in the United Kingdom, Allende, Mexico, Comrade Pollyanna, says Dust James. Don't know what that means, but that's okay. Wisconsin, Grand Junction, Colorado, Future Socialist Commonwealth of William Pengrad. I don't know what that means. Houston, Oregon, Auckland, New Zealand, Kansas City, here I come. Juan from Mexico, Queensland, Australia, I am with you about your billionaire talking. Well, thank you for understanding what I'm saying. Lockport, New York, Thailand, Hogwarts, Northern UK. We got a Harry Potter fan here. Hello from Iran, says Frank Nahai, Montana. Settlers in Alabama, or no, Sharon in Alabama, right? David in Italy. Richmond, Virginia, Alpha Centaura, Space Communists, Happy New Year from California, Nowhere Particular, Big Har Har, Big 10-4, In the Basement Surrounded by Books, says Red Illuminati, Kieran from San Diego, welcome Kieran, Little Falls, New Jersey, Dan Keating, Max the Sax from Virginia, shout out to you, Max, Nate from Sydney, Australia, California, North Carolina, Dust James, Florida, Tampa, Lafayette, Louisiana, Don in Sonora. I don't know what Sonora is. Ithaca, New York. Michael is with us. Illinois, Chicago. Very good. Happy New Year. The Matrix. Someone is in a chair. Very good. Laos. Very, very good. Edmonton. Very good stuff. Santa Fe, New Mexico is with us. Very, very good. Francis Chavez from Maryland. Very, very good, folks. Very, very good. Greenock, Scotland, Thailand, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Ryan in Canada. Shout out to you, Ryan. Great. I'm glad so many people are here. It is such an amazing, diverse crowd that we have here. This is really, really great. You know, the fact we can get so many people from so many places here. Asheville, North Carolina. This is really, really tremendous. You know, it's always fun. Mexico, I don't even know, Windhoek, right? This is great. Great group of people, folks. This Sunday, I am going on George Galloway's show. So be sure to tune in to George Galloway's show this Sunday because I will be on it. That'll be fun. I love going on George Galloway's show. It's always lots of fun to go on George Galloway's show. Someone said happy birthday. It hasn't been my birthday for 2 whole days, folks. I mean, my birthday was the day before New Year's, so we're way past that. Kathy from Boston is with us. Thailand. My goodness, people are still pouring in. How many people are there? I'm glad you're here, though. I want more people here. We are a community. We really are a community. Hello from Michigan. Another Michigander, as they call you all. Great. Very good stuff, right? Good stuff. Great. Folks, you all are very, very special to me. We are a great community. We really we help each other, right? This community has really gotten a lot of us through dark times. The pandemic is happening. Asheville, North Carolina, Boris, shout out to you, Boris. Right? These are hard times for a lot of people, and we're getting folks through it. And we, as a community, we come together. We get stuff done. Right? We have really raised awareness about the issues that are important to us. We are on here. We are consistently on here, engaging, having back and forth conversations, right? My book on Kamala Harris, right, which was very much the result of these conversations, stimulating me, getting me to think about things as I did more research. That book is out, and that's really a collective product of this community. And that book is out there. It's been reviewed in the Morning Star. It's been reviewed on Max Perry wrote a review that was picked up by all kinds of people, and we're building a community here. I mean, we are really special what we do here, and my hope is that the Center for Political Innovation will be able to start doing stuff in real life and building in real life events that are very, very powerful. That is my hope. Fingers crossed as we get toward a better tomorrow. So good times, folks. Stay strong, and I want to just tell you all here on New Year's how important you all are to me. You all are deeply, deeply important to me. You all are deeply, deeply important to me. And I want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart for being part of this community, for giving me a reason to get on here and ramble every couple nights and do these YouTube lives. You all are so, so special to me. And I don't know what I would do without you. Ring in 2021 on this Friday night by singing Friday I'm in Love by The Cure. I don't know that song. So I don't know that song. I can't sing it. And I'm not on here to sing. I mean, I break into song here and there to make a point, but I'm not taking song requests. That is one thing I will not do. I will give you answers, but I'm not doing that, right? I'm not a singer. I'm not a professional musician. I sing to make a point, but that's about it. So anyhow, on that note, folks, I'm going to start answering your super chat questions, right? Because you asked your questions and you will get an answer. That person that asked me to sing a song, I don't know the song and I don't do songs on demand, but they did get an answer. So like I said, not always am I able to give you necessarily the answer you want, but if you super chat me, you get an answer. All right, left comms. Left comms who think that the USSR and China are not socialist. Demarchism. Demarchism. Heard of it. And Sonora is a state in Mexico or a town in California. Sonora is a state in Mexico or a town in California. Is that a question? I don't know. Am I supposed to answer that? I don't know. All right. So why? How do I send money to the CPI? Easy. Well, first of all, you're not sending money to the CPI yet because it's not incorporated yet. We're going to be incorporating very shortly. So technically, at this moment, the CPI is not an existing entity, right? We don't have bank accounts and such. It's an organization. We're having Zoom calls. We're meeting, and I'm paying for most of it, But we, as an organization, we're going to be incorporating very shortly, so there will be an actual entity. But at this moment, there is a donate button on the website. But yeah, once we're incorporated, that'll become a much more clear thing. I have patrons, Patreon. So there you go. All right. So left comms. Why do they say the USSR and China are not socialist? Generally, you get a couple arguments, right? The first argument you get from left comms, why are there so many communists from Ohio? Oh, communists from Ohio. Why so many? Question mark. All right. Okie dokie. So what about people who say that the USSR and China are not socialist? What arguments, and you're talking about left comms, what arguments do they make? First of all, the first general argument you get is just standard. They aren't democratic. That's standard, right? Well, they don't have freedom. They don't have human rights. They're not democratic, right? Socialism is workers controlling the means of production. But if it's not purely democratic, if I read in the New York Times that it's a dictatorship, that it's not, they don't have the freedoms we get, then it obviously can't be socialist. That's the standard argument you get. Right? And then you have to point out that actually, proletarian revolution and the renegade Kautsky, when countries are under attack and under siege and facing an onslaught, they don't have the ability to just be purely open and free. They have to lock down and fight for their rights, and they have to become very centralized and authoritarian, and there's that argument, right? So then there's another intellectual trick you'll get from people. They conflate socialism with communism. This is one you got to watch for. Trotskyites do this, right? Trotskyites do this. Anarchists do this all the time. It's a very common trick, right? They'll say, oh, communism means there's no state. The Soviet Union was a state, therefore it's not socialist. Well, you have to remember, there are two stages. Socialism, or the first stage of communism, involves a state controlling the means of production. Communism, the higher stage of communism, is a world of so much vast material abundance that the state withers away. Two different things, right? So that's a very common thing, right? There's wages in the Soviet Union. Well, if you read The State and Revolution, if you read Marx, there are wages in socialism, right? Labor coupons or compensation for hours worked. That is the lower stage of communism. You have that, right? And so it's a very common rhetorical trick you'll get from Trotskyites and anarchists. Oh, they have a state. Oh, they have wages. Oh, they have in stores people buy things. So that's conflating the higher stage of communism with the lower stage of communism or socialism. That's an intellectual trick you'll get. With China, there's the whole thing about they have a market sector and such. That's a little bit of a different conversation. And then sometimes you will get something that sounds that's a little bit more genuine, right? And this is a little bit more genuine of a left criticism of China and the USSR. And this is actually an interesting one. And you'll find this like more educated Trotskyists, people who've actually studied Trotsky, not people who, just don't want to be associated with evil Stalinists, whatever. People who've actually studied Trotsky will make arguments like, well, and this is true, right? Feudalism was replaced by capitalism, which was a higher mode of production. Why are all the countries that have had socialism countries in the developing world who have not yet reached a level of industrialization and development that is higher than the Western capitalist countries, right? And isn't socialism supposed to be when you had capitalism, the workers rising up and seizing their factories? And when China and Russia had their revolution, they were mostly feudal countries already. So, so how could they have had socialism? And socialism is the workers rising and seizing the means of production. And that is starting to be a little bit more of a legitimate argument, right? That's a legitimate argument, right? It's true. Russia and China were not fully capitalist countries at the time they had a revolution. That's true. And they had peasant majorities, and right, capitalism when it emerged was a higher stage than feudalism that came before it, a higher level of development and prosperity. So why is it that the socialist countries of the developing world, why is it that they've not reached a higher level of development than the capitalist countries if they're supposed to be a higher system? That's a fair point. And that points to the fact that socialism can't really become full socialism when it is attacked, right? That as long as socialism is blockaded and under attack and participating in a global economy dominated by capitalism, it is going to be restricted. Right? It's going to be restricted. It's going to be constrained, and it's not going to be a fully socialist society. That full socialism requires capitalism to be fully eliminated. In order for the completion of socialism, in order for socialism to be really and completely socialism, it would require a society where there is no more capitalists and imperialists threatening them. There is only one global economy. Now, Trotsky points all of this out and then tries to use that to make the case for a permanent revolution. Well, he's wrong about the permanent revolution part, but the fact that all the socialist countries have been countries in the developing world that have broken out of capitalism, right, or broken out of capitalist control and domination by the West to start on their development. They've been less developed than the Western capitalist countries. That's a fair point. And it just points to the fact that for them to really flourish and be fully socialist societies, you need the imperialists to no longer be threatening them. And of course, you don't hear that from these socialist countries. You will never hear them say, we are not fully socialist. You'll never hear that, right? Because they can't say that. They're under attack. Right? They're trying to build a socialist society. They're trying to mobilize their population. You're not going to have Stalin come out and say to the people while they're working hard to build the 5-year plans, yeah, just so you know, guys, this isn't fully complete socialism. So you're not going to have that, right? Kim Il-sung, when he's trying to organize the people of Korea to build up their country and industrialize it, he's going to be like, just so you know, guys, it's not going to be really full and complete socialism here in Korea until we have no more imperialists. So you're not, no. Right? So no socialist country is ever going to come out and say what I just said, right? Because that's a little bit tough to swallow. That until as long as Western capitalism is on the scene and repressing socialist countries, as long as the Western capitalist countries dominate the global economy, socialism is always going to be limited. It's always going to be highly militarized. It's always going to be more authoritarian. It's always going to be on a lower level of development. So because of that, right? Because of that, it's not higher in terms of abundance. It's not higher in terms of productivity than the capitalist countries. That is a fair point. That's a fair point. So that's a fair point. It's a fair point to make. But it doesn't change the fact that in these societies, the banks, factories, and industries are owned by the people and controlled by the Communist Party and the state organized that came out of a popular revolution. So it doesn't change the fact that these countries are socialist, but their socialism is not the full blossoming of socialism. That's a fair point. Now, that's something left comms will say, and they're not completely wrong in saying that, but that doesn't make it not socialist. So we've gone over their major critiques. And let me add, one thing that came up, this actually gets to the conversation I just had with Jason, right, is that what I just said about how socialist countries, because they are under attack and they're existing in a world dominated by Western capitalism, they're not the full socialism, and they're not a greater level in terms of abundance than the Western capitalist countries. That's an important thing to understand, because there was great confusion about this during the Cold War, right? And that Che Guevara and his attempt to build a new socialist man in Cuba, and the Gang of Four The Gang of Four, right? Green Trotskyism. Climate movement. And the Gang of Four in China both argued that you could have full communism on the basis of poverty. Right? Che Guevara thought that in Cuba they could organize in a way they'd just teach people to be selfless and egalitarian, and through kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, brainwashing or mass teaching of the population, they could make Cuba a fully socialist and even communist society in a state of poverty. And the Gang of Four argued that in China, with the Cultural Revolution, we can make China fully communist on the basis of poverty. And they were wrong, right? They were wrong. You couldn't do that. Cuba has had to adopt market mechanisms and had to have material incentives, right? They, as Che Guevara's policies were rejected by Fidel Castro, and now Cuba is moving in more of a Deng Xiaoping direction. China, they tried the Cultural Revolution. Didn't work out too well, right? Almost led to a counter-revolution. Now they have market mechanisms, and you cannot build full socialism and communism on the basis of poverty. You can't do that. You really cannot do that, right? And, as the socialist countries were struggling during the Cold War, they were under attack, they were surrounded, and they were bombarded, and some of them lost that understanding. They lost the understanding that socialism and communism are about reaching a higher stage of development, right? That in order to fully break down capitalist relations and fully break down and fully move toward the ultimate goal of communism, you need vast material abundance. That was lost during the Cold War, and that's really a tragedy of the Cold War. Left comms, like very few left comms, but some left comms will have some notion of what I just said there, okay, have some notion of that, and that's where they're a little bit correct. That doesn't change that these countries were socialist, but it does point out that the socialism that existed during the Cold War, the socialism that exists today around the world, is not full socialism. It is socialism fighting for its life. It is socialism under attack. It is socialism struggling to exist in a world dominated by capitalism. So socialism certainly exists in the world today, but left comms, Trotskyites, others might be correct in pointing out that it is a socialism that is restrained. It is a socialism that is not the full blossoming of what it should be, right? That is true. And that is a fair point to make. And we've spent a long time on that question, but, there you go. I mean, it needs to be said, right? So I hope that was insightful. There you go. Okay. Michael Parenti coined this as siege socialism. Right, Michael Parenti. I made an audio clip of a great lecture where Michael Parenti pointed this out, that there would not have been a KGB if there had not been imperialist attacks on the USSR. There would not have been gulags if there were not imperialist attacks on the USSR. The way socialism has been, the huge achievements that socialism has had have come at a cost, and have come, there's been restrictions on it, and that these are things we have to acknowledge, but it's a result of material conditions. All righty. Okay. Who will replace Lukashenko? I have no idea. Lukashenko, I'm sure he will be replaced at some point. The guy's not young, and he ain't going to live forever. My hope is that he's replaced by somebody who will continue to believe in the socialist organization of the economy and making sure people have jobs and healthcare and education. And that I hope that the tension there between the young people that are angry at the government and some of the protests, I hope that can be resolved, and that Belarus can move forward and develop and stand with Russia and China against imperialism and become a more stable, prosperous country. All right. Tankies argue with everyone. Well, but everyone argues with everybody. I mean, that's how the internet is, right? The internet brings out the disagreeable side of people. In real life organizing, your goal is to work with people with whom you disagree, find common ground, and actually get things done. That's what people who organize try to do. They try to go and find people with whom they disagree, find something they can agree on, and unite around it and accomplish something. That's what real life organizing is about. The internet is a completely different world. On the internet, it's not about making friends and winning over people. It's not about getting along with people you disagree with, making alliances with them. It's about clickbait. It's about getting the most likes and the most shares, making the biggest noise. And so there is almost an incentive to argue with people, an incentive to disagree with people. And that is a big problem. Everyone argues with everybody on the internet. Internet communism is not real organizing. Internet communism is an intellectual discussion. It is educational. It's very educational. That's why I do these lives. But at the end of the day, building an actual organization, like I'm doing with the Center for Political Innovation, actually accomplishing things, is a very, very, very different endeavor, where people are incentivized to get along with each other, not to disagree with each other, right? That in a way, social media can be a little bit toxic, right? Nobody ever wants to just say, you know what, I agree. Everyone's got to find a way to encourages people to be hyper individuals, atomized, so that is just an understanding. So, that's why I love doing these lives, and I will continue to do these lives, because you all are amazing, and we are an amazing community. But I want to translate this into a real think tank that has real events and real educational forums and builds a real network of real people who really want to really get us to socialism here in the United States. So there you go. All righty. All right. Tigray conflicts. I have no idea what that is. Forgive my ignorance. I have no idea what that is. All right. Ernst Thälmann, the German Communist Party, and the German Revolution. All right. I've talked about this before, but, bears repeating. Someone did super chat me about it, so I will answer it. All right. Germany had a failed revolution in 1919. In Germany, the communists rose up and overthrew the Kaiser, right? The working class, the World War I was ending, and the workers rose up and they overthrew the government, and Marxists came to power and created capitalism. The Social Democratic Party of Germany sold out the revolution. The workers had overthrown and poured into the streets and toppled the government, and the result was not socialism. And Bavaria formed the Bavarian Soviet Republic, and Rosa Luxemburg and the Spartacus Bund rose up, and they had their uprisings. But at the end of the day, it was Marxists and communists who created the capitalist Weimar Republic. And that poisoned the political atmosphere in Germany for the next couple decades, right? At that point, when the communists pulled defeat out of the jaws of victory, right? When the communists completely failed, when the Marxist movement, the biggest Marxist party in the world, the Social Democratic Party of Germany, failed to establish socialism, when the workers rose up and overthrew the government. And then not only did they fail to do it themselves, they killed Rosa Luxemburg and killed Karl Liebknecht for trying to do it when they failed. They crushed the Bavarian Soviet Republic. And when the Social Democrats prevented socialism from coming to Germany, when that happened, that cursed German revolutionary workers' movements. From that point, there was a line of blood. There was a river of blood between the Social Democrats, who had created the Weimar Republic, and the communists, who had been admirers of Rosa Luxemburg. And so the German Communist Party came into existence, and KDP and the SDP of Germany, they didn't get along with each other. They were not good friends, not good folks. And the German Communist Party referred to the Social Democrats as social fascists, right? And the Social Democrats, they said, our main enemy is on the left, right? And the Social Democrats killed communists, and the communists killed Social Democrats. And these groups, shot at each other pretty regularly and murdered each other pretty regularly. You had the Red May events in the Wedding district in Berlin, where there was violence for a long period of time. And as the left of Germany was divided, right, the Social Democrats became the party of factory workers. There was a depression during the Great Depression. Well, the factory workers still had jobs. They were still employed. So they were very conservative, right? Because they still had jobs. They became more and more conservative. They didn't want to rock the boat. They actually had a job in a factory. They were still employed. The communists became the party of the hungry, desperate, unemployed people, and they became more and more adventurous because folks had nothing to lose, and they were ready to go out and fight. They had to fight just to get food. So The German Communist Party became more and more ultra-left. The German Social Democratic Party became more and more reformist. And all of this led to a situation where eventually the Nazis were able to take power. And people want to make it simple. They want to make it so simple. They say, oh, if only the Social Democrats and the Communists had joined arm in arm. Well, it's way, way, way more complicated than that, right? These, when groups are shooting at each other for 10 years, when they've killed multiple people, when one party represents one section of society, another represents another section, it was it was a lot harder to do than to just say it. And there's a level of arrogance from people when they read over this. They just say, oh, if only they had joined forces. Well, it's not that simple. It's not that simple. And it was a disaster. And ultimately out of that, you got the Nazis, right? And let's not forget that, and I've made this point before, I make this point in my Kamala Harris book, but it needs to be said, that Hitler is not a representation of Germans. Okay? There is this whole narrative that many people have, and I'm not German, by the way. I'm Irish. I mean, I'm Irish, maybe some French ancestry in there, Huguenot French ancestry. I'm not German, so this is not me defending my own nationality. Hitler is not a representation of Germans, okay? Folks, prior to Hitler, Germany was probably the most progressive country in the Western world. Germany had the biggest communist party outside of the Soviet Union. Germany had the biggest Marxist party, the party that Marx and Engels built, right? The Goethe program, critique of the Goethe program. That's a critique of the founding of the German Social Democratic Party, the SDP, right? Germany had, in the 1920s, the biggest gay rights movement in the world. Gay people from all over the world went to Germany because that was where they had gay bars and drag shows, and that's also where they had huge buildings dedicated to studying human sexuality, right? In Germany, prior to Hitler, there was a huge gay rights movement. It was one of the only places in the world where gay people could openly walk around being gay and, hold hands and talk about being gay. And there were whole think tanks and institutions in Germany dedicated to studying gay rights, right? I mean, Germany was a very, 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 very progressive, socialist, left-wing country. And fascism and Nazism is not German. It's British, right? The ideas on which the Nazi state was founded are British ideas. Malthusianism, the idea that there are too many people in the world, that some races are inferior or whatever, that's British Empire ideology. That's British Empire philosophy. The British were the ones going around promoting that. Furthermore, right, this notion that that you need an authoritarian military state to stop the communists, that's British, right? The Nazi ideology and the Nazi party, while it claimed to be German, it promoted British ideas, Malthusianism, social Darwinism, reactionary stuff, going back to the ancient days, building a Reich. All of this was British. It was very, very British. And British intelligence, this is the important thing, this is a fact, British intelligence funded the Nazis. Right? British intelligence was very, very afraid of Germany having a communist revolution. The Germans and the Italians too. Mussolini was paid for by British intelligence in Italy, and the Nazi Party in the 1920s was paid for, in the early 20s, was paid for by British intelligence. The British Secret Service was giving money to the Nazis to kill communists because they were afraid of Germany having a communist revolution. Now, eventually, the Nazis, as they got bigger and stronger, were able to make a deal with Hollimer Schacht and the Krupps and the Tysons and the German industrial capitalists. But in the beginning, the Nazis were a British counter-gang, right? Because the communists that were aligned with the Soviet Union had a huge amount of influence and neighborhoods they controlled. The British were very afraid of what a German and Russian united front would look like. If Germany and Russia were to join arm in arms and become anti-imperialist socialist states, the British Empire would be doomed. So the British found Hitler and began giving money to this nutty, this nutty, fanatical, racist, unemployed guy, veteran of World War I, and that fascism and Nazism are British ideas, okay? Right? And that what they believed in is very much British. And this is just a fact, okay? And it doesn't represent the British working class. It represents the British ruling class, right? The ultra-rich ruling class of Britain, right? The British bankers and British monopolists, right? Who'd been doing the Malthusianism thing and the eugenics thing all over the world and hated communism with all their passion and all their might, right? They were sympathizers with the Nazis. The British royal family, folks, this is so well documented, but nobody talks about this. There was a king of England in the 1930s who had to step down because he was so well known to be a sympathizer with the Nazis. I don't read things about people's bodies. He's such a well-known sympathizer with the Nazis, and he had to step down. He had to step down. Right? Wallis Simpson. He stepped down in order to marry Wallis Simpson because she was a divorced woman. As the head of the Church of England, he could not marry a divorced woman, so he gave up his throne. Well, everybody knew this because this guy was an open admirer of the Nazis and Oswald Mosley and the British Union of Fascists. They actually, what? I'm sorry. What is someone? What's going on here? Folks. Mods, do your jobs in the chat, please. There's people being crazy. Alrighty. But anyway, folks, there you go. All right. Folks, anyway, I made my point that we have to, the Germans have been unfairly treated by history, right? There is this whole narrative that says that somehow the Holocaust and Hitler is a representation of what Germans are about, right? That's how Germans are. They're just these authoritarian, hateful, bigoted, evil people. That's not true. That's not true. That is not the truth. Okay. And, British workers are not like this too. This is the British ruling class. This is the Adam Smith ruling class. They pushed this idea. They are basically the root of Nazi philosophy. Alrighty. Okay. Now somebody, I assume they were being facetious. They were talking about Captain Picard of Star Trek, the fictional character that he flies around in space, and is he a billionaire? Right. I mean, that's kind of the point, right? Is that he doesn't technically have $1 billion because in the hypothetical Star Trek universe, angles on authority. In the hypothetical Star Trek universe, there's no money, but he is technically experiencing the life of a he's wealthier than a billionaire. Billionaires can't go to other planets even in our time. Alrighty. So, all right. Growth under socialism versus libertarian capitalist growth. Well, big difference. Libertarian capitalist growth is based upon the rule of profits. Whatever is profitable, that's what they do. Right? No restrictions. Libertarians don't want any restrictions on the profit market. Well, socialist growth is a state central plan guiding production. This is the difference between capitalism and socialism. Capitalism is production organized for the profits of owners. Socialism is production organized according to what's best for society and a state central plan. No, it's not socialist just because the government does that. No, I don't say that, so stop misrepresenting my position. There you go. There you go. Alrighty. I cannot keep up with what's going on in the chat, so there you go. Alrighty. Republicans think that Joe Biden is a Marxist. Again, this is why we have our work cut out for us. We need to go to the American people and explain to them what socialism actually is. Right? If anyone thinks Joe Biden is a Marxist, they're completely delusional. We need to go to the American people and explain what socialism actually is. There you go. I mean, there's not much more to it than that. But things like abolish billionaires, that makes it sound like we oppose wealth and want to make everyone poor, don't help, right? We need to find ways of explaining what Marxism actually is to the American people. It's not that complicated, right? The fact that people would be so confused they would think Joe Biden is a Marxist shows that we have our work cut out for us. And it also shows how dangerous it is that these voices speaking in the name of Marxism are endorsing Joe Biden. Big problem. All righty. Do people like Trotsky because they like what Trotsky actually said, or no? Actually, most people who like Trotsky, I am convinced, are simply looking for a way to not be associated with the Soviet Union. Right? They don't want to be associated with the Soviet Union because they heard on TV or they heard from their social studies teacher in high school that the Soviet Union was a big evil society. So they don't want to be associated with it. So therefore, they're a Trotskyist, not an evil Stalinist, and it's kind of sad. But there's a lot of that going on in the left, no doubt about it. All right, what is a revolutionary question? I don't know. I mean, a question about revolutionary politics, a question that has never been asked before. I have never heard of. No idea. All right. Why did the Deng Xiaoping reforms in China work and perestroika did not work? Well, I think that the Chinese Communist Party was much more ideologically united. I think that also that in Chinese society there was much more of a kind of a willingness to adjust and change, and that in the Soviet Communist Party in the 80s, you had a big section of the party that didn't really believe in communism anymore. That was very clear. Plus, the people who did believe in it were very, very rigid and unwilling to change. In China, the majority of the party believed in communism still, and they were willing to adjust and change. So I think that the Soviet system, a lot of the Soviet leaders were compromised and didn't believe in communism and had been courted by Western intelligence. Furthermore, the ones who did, the conservative opposition, they called them, they were folks that were very, very rigid and stuck in their ways and didn't have original new thinking. All right. Whereas the Chinese Communist Party was a little more fluid. Private guns in Venezuela. There's a big problem with gun violence in Venezuela. Big problem with gun violence. I wouldn't say they don't have problems. I mean, obviously they don't have like school shootings and stuff like we have, but they have big problems with gun violence in Venezuela. I mean, there's drug gangs that fight each other, and I wouldn't say that Venezuela has no problems with private guns. They do have problems with it. I mean, they have Bolivarian militias that are loyal to the government, but there's a big. I think that while I praise everything Venezuela has accomplished in housing, healthcare, and education, and I mean they've done amazing things for their people, and they are surviving under a horrendous blockade by the imperialists, trying to limit their ability to get food, etc. So I don't downplay any of their accomplishments, but I don't think it's correct to say they have no problem with gun violence. I think that there is a gun violence problem, but it's mainly drug dealers killing other drug dealers. It's mainly criminal groups shooting each other. It's not it's not like what we have here, where we have this mass shooting phenomenon. They don't have that. They certainly don't have that. All right. Negative effects of the Deng Xiaoping reforms. Heightened inequality. That's one of them. There has been a greater rise in inequality in China due to the Deng Xiaoping reforms. That's not good. There have been abuses, things that have gone on in factories that I'm sure aware about that are wrong. There's been more corruption in China. That's why Xi Jinping is waging his campaign against corruption, right? The whole mass line campaign. That's why Xi Jinping is necessary. So yes, I mean, there have been negative effects. No doubt about it. All righty. Are the cyber hacks false flags? I don't know, right? And that's the weird thing about cyber hacks. We just have to take their word for it, right? I mean, nobody knows. They come out, oh my God, there was a cyber attack. Why? Because we said so. Okay. I mean, they could be false flags for all I know. I just know what they said about it. That's all I know. And I know they lie all the time. The U.S. government lies all the time. So is it possible these cyber attacks go exactly 100% as they say? Sure. Is it possible that these cyber attacks are completely made up and fake news? I can't rule that out, right? I mean, it was fake. The Naria testimony was fake news. The weapons of mass destruction in Iraq was fake news. So is it possible these cyber attacks never happened? I'm not ruling it out. I'm not saying that's what happened. It very well could be exactly what they say it is, or it could be not. I mean, one thing with the cyber attacks, okay. Anything to say on the Japanese? All right, Japanese. communists. Denouncing. All right. I mean, the thing is that with these cyber attacks, no one's talking about Vault 7 from WikiLeaks, right? WikiLeaks Vault 7 revealed that there is a whole program where they give digital fingerprints, where the CIA and U.S. intelligence agencies have developed a computer program where they can hack someone's computer and make it look like somebody else did it. They can leave digital fingerprints to make it look like you can hack. Not only can you hack somebody, but you make it look like somebody else did it. Why is no one mentioning this? That's a little bit relevant. Every time there's a cyber attack, you have to go, now who really did this? Because you can be sure that if U.S. intelligence has developed this method, there are probably other people who've developed this method. So, I mean, does that mean that, that with cyber attacks, whenever they come out and say, oh, there was a huge cyber attack, it's like, okay, well, all right. Oh, and we think so-and-so did it. Oh, okay. I mean, all we can do as a country is just go, oh, okay. That's all we can do it's just kind of a take their word for it situation. And of course, they always say, oh, and we know for sure it was this person. How do you know for sure it was that person? How do you know it wasn't digital fingerprints? You guys can do it. You have a program. Edward Snowden revealed you guys have a program to do it. So why wouldn't somebody else? All right. People who say stuff about Putin. Well, look, Russia supports Israel, right? Russia also supports the Palestinians, but Russia recognizes Israel. Russia has friendly relations with Israel, right? So it's look, the Russian leaders are not communists, right? And no one's saying they are. The Russian leaders are not communists. They're not Marxists. They are not. They have their view of the world, and they do support Israel, and Russia is friendly to Israel. So, if that's what the person's alluding to in their question, Russia is not a puppet of Israel, very clearly. If Russia was a puppet of Israel, it wouldn't be friendly to Iran, for example, right? Israel hates Iran, and Russia is very friendly to Iran. If Russia was friendly if Russia was a puppet of Israel, it wouldn't be supporting Syria, right? Israel is bombing Syria right now. So Russia maintains a relationship with Israel and is able to get along with Israel to some degree or other, but they're also aligned with Syria. They're also aligned with Iran, and that Russia's a country, okay? But yeah, when people are saying the Russian leader is a puppet of whatever, that's over the top. No, but Russia supports Israel. That's just a fact. I'm sorry, I've been there, I've seen it. Russia, they bring big delegations from Israel. They have friendship with Israel. So Russia is not anti-Israel, but Russia is not a puppet of Israel either. So that's that. Would the Biden administration also like a war with Iran? I feel like, to some degree, comment on the importance of Engels writing The Role of Labor in the Transition from Ape to Man. Role of labor, transition from ape to man. All righty. Thanks, David. Would the Biden administration also like to have a war with Iran? Maybe, but I feel like Biden really felt that the Iran nuclear deal was a crowning achievement. And I think that Biden himself and the people in the Obama administration with him were more committed to a Libya strategy with Iran. They were hoping to slip American influence into Iran, destabilize Iran, have some kind of color revolution. That was their strategy. Whereas the Trump administration's strategy is to isolate Iran, have an arms race in the Middle East, etc. And so I think that at this point, Biden might represent a slightly softer approach with Iran. But at the same time, Biden has made all kinds of compromises with neocons, right? The Obama administration, it had a lot of neocon folks in it, but it had made some, it had some compromises. Biden is coming in with a bunch of people that opposed the Iran nuclear deal in his administration, right? His new cabinet and his administration is going to be full of people who didn't support the Iran nuclear deal. So on that basis, it's going to be quite interesting, right? I think that if anything, it's the Hillary Clinton State Department in Silicon Valley. They're the folks that are probably going to have the most power in the Biden White House. What they want is global destabilization and revolution. So we'll have to see. The Permanent Revolution faction, the Silicon Valley fascists, are back, headed for the White House, and It's a little bit different than the Trump folks, though. They're not as explicitly tied to factions in Israel and such, so it's a little bit more complicated. All right. Stalin having parties and getting leaders drunk. I don't know, and I don't care. Okay? I mean, yeah, I mean, so what? I mean, right? I mean, I'm sure that American leaders have parties and people get drunk and whatever. I mean, I don't drink alcohol personally, but I think that, if people want to drink alcohol, that's their business. I know the early socialist movement pushed temperance, but I think that there's a lot of Americans who after work they want to go have a beer, they relax with their friends. What's wrong with that, right? Okay, so Stalin had some big parties where people got drunk, whatever. There's a lot of anecdotes about Stalin you'll hear that make him sound like a really awful guy that are completely hard to verify. But that said, if Stalin had parties and people got drunk, I mean, it wouldn't really surprise me based on what I've read about the Bolsheviks and their culture. I'm not seeing the scandal here. All right. Kerala land redistribution. I don't know enough about that, but that sounds great. I've heard that Kerala in India, that's the district in India, the province that's controlled by the Communist Party of India, Marxist, they've had tremendous achievements. They really have. And so, I think that's worth looking into. Thanks for bringing that up. All righty. All right. Socialist America and imperialism. Of course. Of course. In order for the USA to actually be socialist, imperialism would have to end, right? I mean, imperialism is capitalism in its monopoly stage, right? Imperialism is the rule of the world by a few big corporations and banks. China, Dalai Lama. All right. China and Dalai Lama. Ugh. I'm tired. You all are wearing me out between that conversation I had with Jason and everything, but I'm going to keep going. You sent the super chats. I will give you an answer. All right. But yes, a socialist America would have to end imperialism. Imperialism is a system where American corporations and banks dominate the world, right? Where a few monopolies, it's the highest stage of capitalism. Lenin wrote a whole book, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. So if the USA were to move towards socialism, the economic system called imperialism coming out of the United States would by definition have to end. All righty. Do I know what demochism is? No. I've never heard that word before. All righty. Someone said that named a state in Mexico or a town in Texas. Okay. Whatever. All right. Why are there so many communists from Ohio? That's an interesting question, right? I'm from Ohio. Xenophobia in U.S. media. Alrighty. Xenophobia in U.S. media. All right, so why are there so many communists from Ohio? Well, there's more U.S. presidents from the United States than from Ohio, and from any other. I'm sorry. Wow, I'm tired. There are more presidents of the United States from Ohio than from any other state, right? And they're all like obscure presidents you've never heard of. Ohio is a very important state, right? I mean, it's Midwest, but it's not New England. It's not the South. It's not the far west, and it's not even the deep Midwest, right? You're still up there by Lake Erie. Ohio, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Youngstown, Columbus. I mean, these cities were once industrial centers. It's very densely populated, I can understand, and it's a state that has a lot of people in it. Right? It had industry. It had labor unions. Right? The sit-down strike wave of 1936 started in Ohio, in Akron, not very far from where I grew up. In Akron, Ohio, the rubber workers are the ones who started the sit-down strike wave. Eugene Debs went. He was from Indiana, but he came to Ohio many times. There was a big socialist movement. Right? The Communist Party. In your early years of the Communist Party. They had, there was the May Day riots of Cleveland in 1919, where Charles Ruthenberg, who was a founding leader of the Communist Party, led the people of Cleveland to, have fights with the right wing and stuff like that. So there's a big history there. It makes sense. Oh boy, what does it take for a Chinese president to be designated as a core leader? All righty. Core leader. All right. So yeah, I mean, Ohio, it makes sense, right, that there would be a lot of communists from there, because it's densely populated, because it has an industrial history as a state. It makes sense. All righty. All right. Is the climate movement green Trotskyism? I don't know if I would put it that way. I think maybe I could see some similarities there, but I wouldn't give it that label myself. All right. Have I read Engels on Authority? Unless that's a selection from one of Engels's work that I have read, I probably haven't. I've read Anti-Düring. I've read Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific. I've read The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State. But I've read some of his other essays, but if that's not a selection from those essays that I've read, I haven't read it. Okay. Okay. The Japanese Communist Party denouncing the Chinese Communist Party. Well, the Japanese Communist Party is a Euro Communist Party, right? In 1978, when the Italian Communist Party and the Spanish Communist Party and the Communist Party of France cut ties with the Soviet Union and denounced Soviet foreign policy, the Japanese Communist Party also did. The Japanese Communist Party has denounced the people of North Korea and its nuclear testing. The Japanese Communist Party is very much out of the Euro-communist tradition. So that makes sense, right? The French Communist Party is not particularly supportive of various countries around the world that are struggling against imperialism. So I'm not surprised to hear that. It's deeply offensive, I think, because of Japan's history as a colonial power, right? Japan killed literally millions of Koreans and literally millions of Chinese people. So you would think that communists in Japan would make a point of respecting the self-determination of Chinese people and of Korean people, and would kind of go out of their way to be more sympathetic to the communist movements of Koreans and Chinese people. However, that does not appear to be the case, and that is certainly disappointing. One thing that I did learn, which is apparently when the Japanese Communist Party was founded officially after World War II, right? It had been underground. After World War II, it was like reestablished as a legal party. That the majority of the members were Korean, which is interesting, right? Because there were so many Korean slaves and Korean, workers in Japan, that many of the Japanese Communist Party's founders were actually Korean, which is fascinating to me. What's also interesting is after World War II, when the Korean people living in Japan were choosing where to go, right? They could return to their homeland finally after the war. They were free. The majority of the Korean people living in Japan went to North Korea, and no one talks about that. The majority of the Koreans in Japan, when they were finally allowed to return to their homeland after the war, returned to North Korea, not South Korea, because everybody knew that the government of South Korea was full of Japanese collaborators. I think that's fascinating history as well. There you go. Interesting stuff. David Fox, good friend of the program, asked about the role of labor in the transition from ape to man, which is a very important essay that Frederick Engels wrote, where he talks about how labor, in the sense, that human beings work and build and create things, is uniquely human. Now, that's the point that he makes, right? That other animals do things that might be considered work, but that human labor, right, human production, is uniquely human, and that as humans were emerging from apes, one of the things they did was the ability to use tools, and that really what makes human beings particularly unique is that they are the only species that forces the environment to serve them. All other species, basically, they interact with the environment or whatever, but humanity is the only species that has full domination over the environment and forces the environment to serve him. And that's the basis for, in Frederick Engels' pamphlet, Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific, that's the basis of when he says that that communism is the fulfillment of the human experience, where human beings have complete dominion over nature and are no longer, threatened by scarcity. And it's kind of fascinating. Certainly not radical environmentalism. I'll put it that way. It's certainly not what the Malthusian wing of the Green movement would want to say. But there you go. All righty. All right. China and the Dalai Lama. Well, look, the Dalai Lama, right? Tibet before before the socialist revolution, before when the Dalai Lama was in power in Tibet, it was an awful feudal regime. People's eyes were gouged out, and people were tortured, and most people were slaves and had no rights, and it was horrendous. And China did not go into Tibet with guns blazing and force communism on the people of Tibet. There's a very good pamphlet, When the Serfs Rose Up in Tibet, written by Anna Louise Strong, who was there. There's also W.E.B. Du Bois, who is a great African American scholar who visited Tibet during the process, and it was the Tibetan people. It was Tibetans who rose up and overthrew the Dalai Lama. It was Tibetans that destroyed the ancient, monasteries that were there. It was Tibetans that laid the basis for socialism in Tibet, right? That people want to make it sound, there's this narrative, the evil Han Chinese are imposing their culture and their ways on the Tibetans. That's not what happened. That is not what happened. Now, at the end of the day, it was the Tibetan people, the slaves of Tibet, who rose up and overthrew the Dalai Lama and established socialism. And the USA fomented the Tibet Civil War. People forget there was a whole civil war in Tibet in the 1950s, right? It's been erased from history. The U.S. government trained all kinds of Tibetan separatists, like including the Dalai Lama's brother, Gwalo Thadop. I'm probably butchering that name. He was trained in Colorado, and he and a bunch of people were airdropped into Tibet in the 1950s, and they waged a horrendous civil war in which hundreds of thousands of people died, right? It was a horrendous civil war, and there was the Tibet Civil War of the 1950s, and the Chinese communists had to mobilize the population of Tibet. They sent troops of their own to fight off this army of fanatical extremists, that wanted to restore Tibetan feudalism and put the Dalai Lama back on the throne. And yeah, it was a civil war, and that the United States waged a proxy war against the Chinese government. And there's actually, there's a book, The CIA's Secret War in Tibet, in which all the secrets are revealed, and how the cult of the Dalai Lama, the worship of the Dalai Lama in Hollywood and all of that was manufactured. The CIA arranged all of that. And the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan separatist movement has been CIA from the beginning, right? John Foster Dulles, or Allen Dulles, one of the founders of the CIA, one of the Dulles brothers, who was a founder of the CIA, wrote that actually the use of mystical religions was a strategy of the CIA in Asia. I quote that in my book, City Builders and Vandals. Tibet has always been part of China. It was part of China since before Christopher Columbus arrived in the United States. Tibet is China, right? It is a national minority that do have a unique language and tradition and culture, which the Chinese government is at this point promoting and funding, building monasteries, doing everything they can to promote it. What I think is really fascinating is that one of the most popular songs during the Cultural Revolution, the Golden Mountain in Beijing, which I won't sing because I don't speak Chinese and I'll ruin it. Golden Mountain in Beijing. It's a beautiful song honoring Mao. That is actually a Tibetan song. It's a Tibetan melody. So the Chinese communists actually picked a Tibetan melody to be one of their main communist songs. Look up the song right now, Golden Mountain in Beijing. It's one of the most beautiful melodies I've ever heard. It is so peaceful. It's one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard. It's not Han Chinese. It is Tibetan. It's a Tibetan melody. Golden Mountain in Beijing. Beautiful song. Beautiful song. All right. What is the uptick of xenophobia in U.S. media about? Well, it's about the fact that they want to distract from the fact that they failed so miserably to handle COVID-19. U.S. media and U.S. society has fallen on its face during this pandemic. Look at the country right now. In the face of the pandemic, the U.S. system has completely left millions of people behind, wrecked, ruined, instability, chaos, and as a result of that, they want to distract it. So they've come up with it's China's fault. The virus is China's fault. China did it. Blame China. No, don't notice our failures. Don't notice our failures. Blame China for it. It's about distracting. That's mainly what it is. Our system has failed so miserably during this pandemic, so miserably, that they want to distract from that, and they want to pour all the anger onto China, right? They want us to not hold our leaders accountable, not demand better relief from our leaders, and blame China for everything that's gone wrong since this pandemic started. That's what's behind it, and we're not going to fall for it. We're not going to fall for it. I think also, I've said enough about that. That's really what's going on. How does one become a core leader of the Chinese Communist Party? They have to be added to the Chinese Constitution, right? There needs to be a Chinese Communist Party conference or Congress. There needs to be a party Congress. At that Congress, they will take a vote to add you to, they will amend the party's constitution to add the teachings of this person to the party's constitution, right? Right, at the party Congress, they they will ratify changes to the Constitution and add someone as a core leader of the party. That's how somebody is added to the Chinese Communist Party's constitution. It's via the party Congress. And on that note, folks, I am exhausted between that conversation I had with Jason and this live. I'm a little bit tired, but I'm glad to engage with all of you. It's a great community that we've got here. I love talking to all of you, and I'm glad we could talk. I'm excited about everything that's coming in 2021. All right, folks. Have a good night. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, the people of all countries must get prepared. Revolution is the main trend in the world today, and we need a government of action that will fight for working families. Hands off Iran. Good night, folks. Thank you, Space Communist.